Good morning. We're going to open our session, and I'd like to welcome everyone to meeting number 87 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083, and a motion adopted by the committee on 20th of September 23, the committee is meeting to resume its study on the economic development of official languages minority communities. Ordinarily, I offer advice to those in virtual mode, but we have the good practices. However, I must point out that if you're not speaking, please stay on mute. And when you're recognized by the chair, you can turn on your mic. Routine motions. I'd like to advise the entire committee that all the witnesses have been tested for the sound quality. So welcome to our witnesses today. As an individual, Mr. Patrick Dupuis, followed by the New Brunswick Economic Council, one of the better provinces in Canada. Gaetan Thomas, President and General Manager. And before you speak, I'd like to advise you that you'll have 5 minutes to introduce your subject. And of course, at your 5 minutes, we're going to unfortunately cut you off, and then we will have question and answers. So I would like to begin with Mr. Dupuis. Mr. Dupuis, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Please proceed. Good morning. I hope I'm coming through clearly. Yes. My name is Patrick Dupuis. I'm the owner of a cheese factory in Alberta. We've been in business for about 8 years now. We've gone through, the highs and lows of the business world, the pandemic, the recession, and the rest of all these good things. But nonetheless, we succeeded in expanding our business based mostly on the Alberta market and westward. I'd like to talk to you, discuss the resources and supports to help businesses grow for Francophone businesses and enterprises, particularly in the rural regions of Alberta. As I said, we've been in business since 2015. It's a small family business, 5 employees, including myself, my daughter, who is currently going to be groomed for ownership of the company. And basically, that's what I'd like to hear today. Well, thank you very much. It's pretty early at your place, right? Yes, it's 6:21. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Mr. Thomas, 5 minutes. Thank you. I'm glad to be here for the Economic Development Council in New Brunswick. I represent 600 members of all Francophone communities in New Brunswick. University of Moncton, the community college, all the institutions which assist in the development of a solid economy. I'd like to give you a bit of background, a bit of context. Often in Francophone communities who are in a minority situation, particularly in rural areas, are somewhat disadvantaged. Fredericton, St. John, we have small groups there, but all the policies seem to be quite centralized. In New Brunswick, we have only 2 French speakers in cabinet, provincial cabinet. So delivering the message for services and supports is all the time more centralized, and we're straying quite a bit from the concept of equal opportunities for all. So economic bilingualism has become an economic force in New Brunswick, an advantage in business. which are not appreciated by the Francophone population in New Brunswick. In rural areas compared to urban areas, the gap is growing, whether it's for access to internet, business opportunities, employment opportunities. They may get some signal, but it's not quite affordable. So there's been a drift to the south of the province for new businesses. We often see in the north that schools are being closed in the northern part of the province. We're not seeing any more building of schools, and all to the benefit of the urban areas such as Moncton. So what we're left with the problems: poverty, isolation. Housing is also an issue. The catalyst, of course, is to grow or build homes in urban areas or suburban areas. Francophone immigration is a lot more difficult to retain in our rural areas. Government policies, one size fits all, it doesn't really go in favor of economic development in the rural parts. These basic services are important in the rural area. Now, I'd like to point out that Minister Miller had made some changes which doesn't take into consideration the arrival of these new citizens, Francophone arrivals to Canada. Of course, the Official Languages Act should be respected in all instances. I'm glad to see that Mr. Arsenault promised that he'd do all he could to ensure that we won't be negatively impacted. Nonetheless, we find ourselves in a period of transition. People have decided to live in New Brunswick. This is fine. The immigration process is rather difficult and complex, and we are quite concerned about that. When we talk about a conversion rate of 60%, the best we've seen at our community college in New Brunswick is 36% in 2023. So we're concerned that this new policy is not being fully applied, or what it is, the ratio of supply and demand and success in the rural areas is quite difficult to attain. There is one example of a policy which is based on the large metropolitan issues like Toronto, for example. And I really don't hope that we can get away from the one-size-fits-all. 15 seconds. 15 seconds. All right. What can be done? The commercial milieu in New Brunswick, if we could recognize the value of these new immigrants, modify the policy such that the Francophone minority communities are protected. And I believe that New Brunswick itself should be managing its own immigration, as it's the only bilingual province in Canada. Thank you very much. Thank you. And you can develop your theories and your concerns. Now, I think this is your first visit to each of the political parties of the first round. We'll have 6 minutes for questions, and we'll hear your answers. 6 minutes, that's question and answer, but you can develop your answer with the next answer, perhaps. We're going to begin first, Vice President of this committee. For the Conservatives, Mr. Godin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that our witnesses have appeared. I know that there's a time lag that's pretty significant out there, but I'd like to interrupt my question time. I'd like to table a motion, if I may. I'd like to introduce the fact that on the 20th of September 2023, we adopted a motion that the committee invite the Minister of Official Languages, Heritage Canada, and Treasury Board President to discuss their mandates and their the plan in integrating official languages into those mandates. That's it. So, the Minister of Canadian Heritage is one of the ministers named or appointed in the Act, the Modernization of the Official Languages Act, that is. Ms. Pascale Saint-Onge declined the invitation of the committee to appear. So I'd like to table this motion, and I hope that the committee can decide quite quickly what to do with this motion. That the committee indicate to the House its deception of the refusal of the Honourable Madame Saint-Onge to appear before the committee. It concerns her mandate and her obligations with the implementation of the modernization of the Official Act within the private as well as federal and associated legislation. Now, we know what her position is. She delegated these authorities. Well, just a second. We do have witnesses present, and I'll explain to the witnesses that the rules of conduct in the committee allow us to introduce a motion. We sort of halt what's going on, do the committee's administrative function. Don't take it personally. I'm just trying to inform the witnesses why we're stopping. And we're coming back to Mr. Godin with your motion, and then, yes. Yes, don't worry, witnesses. I have questions for you, and we'll get back to our Q&A soon. But now we have to follow official procedure. Basically, the Minister of Canadian Heritage delegated her responsibilities to the Commissioner of Official Languages, but that doesn't appear in the law, in the Act. The Commissioner or the Commissariat of the Official Languages will be returning to the committee to explain how they have conducted themselves in relation to their responsibilities. But the Minister does not wish to appear. She's making like Pontius Pilate, washing her hands of the whole thing. And for official languages minority communities, it's quite a bad mark. Okay. We're going to propose an amendment to Mr. Godin's motion. Essentially, ministers have been called to the committee and have appeared, so I have no doubt that we have requested Madame Pascale Saint-Onge, I should say, and I think that the committee should perhaps follow the usual procedures. The amendment that I'm proposing, that the committee request the chair to write to the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Honourable Madame Saint-Onge, to express our disappointment as to her refusal to attend or appear before the committee on the matters mentioned. Now, if we can agree here as a committee that we should ask the chair to send a letter to the minister, and if she does not, if she declines again, well, then maybe we can revert to Mr. Godin's motion and be more insistent and address ourselves to the House, because I don't think we have communicated with her by letter yet. Madame Goodridge, you have the floor. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that you would send a letter, but quite a bit of time has gone by, and if the minister is not aware, it's not the committee's fault. If we want to see her, obviously it is important, and we would like to have her appear. I would have to vote against Mr. Serre's amendment and for Mr. Godin's motion. Monsieur Godin. Thank you. I'd like to come back on the colleague concerning procedure. On this side of the table, Conservative Party, we have to respect a process. You even explained it to our witnesses. That's not usual. But as my colleague has just mentioned, I'd like to call the vote on Mr. Serre's amendment, and then we can proceed. And then I can return back to the questioning, questions and answers with the witnesses. It's not an interrogation after all, it's just questions and answers. Mr. Sanson. Thank you, Chair. I gathered from your comments that a letter had already been sent. The amendment proposed by Mr. Serre was sent, and you should have it on your tablets or in your mail. Oh, I thought you were saying it had been done, the letter to the minister. Mr. Chairman, my first reflex on this, I would agree with sending a letter under your signature, and that we request her to return, to come back. We haven't seen her, but to come back on her decision at least, and see if she can find some time on her very busy agenda to meet with the committee. Because if you go directly to the House, it's fairly partisan, where we didn't advise the minister. She didn't have an opportunity to review her decision. And I think that we should try to develop a bit of cooperation with the minister. She's new in her position, and it's possible that, as my colleague has mentioned, that she was perhaps unaware or she was too busy. And now let's see if she has developed some time to appear before the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanson. Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, we're not playing political games here. It's important to underline that at this point in time, the committee has already sent a letter, a request to the minister. The minister, I hope she knows, she is aware that she is declined, and now doing it a second time around. The way I interpret the situation is that the government is trying to play political games so that the minister doesn't find herself in hot water. So I think that's a critical detail. I do not want to play this back and forth to understand who's playing political games, but it boils down to the fact that we sent an invitation, and it is among their responsibilities to come here and answer questions on Official Languages Act. She declined. This is a fact. So as a committee, are we going to send another letter and ask the minister to reconsider our request? No, we are a parliamentary committee, and we have to respect the institution, and we have to follow the methodology that is in my motion. I am comfortable with the proposal of my colleague, Mr. Serre, when it comes to the amendment. Well, just a clarification, the committee did ask witnesses, including the minister. So the committee sent the request. It is up to parliamentarians and the ministers and the leaders of our political parties to decline an invitation that is within parliamentary rules. So it is the same set of rules that applies to all parliamentarians. Ministers can decline. Now, when we talk about Mr. Serre's amendment, Mr. Bolio, I think you were the next up on the list, and then Mr. Serre. Well, I do not want to prolong this, but our impression is that it was a refusal. She does not want to come here, simply. So I don't want to play this back and forth and then send a letter and then wait to hear an answer again. So we just need to make it clear that we are disappointed. So they are responsible for Part 7 of the Act, So I do not really understand why the minister refuses to appear before the committee. It doesn't make sense. Okay, just something you said at the outset. I have the answer. The minister declined. So for people here, the minister declined, and the reason that was indicated was that the members of the committee already know that the official languages responsibilities have been transferred by decree to the Minister of Official Languages, who would be better suited to answer the questions. So as the Minister of Canadian Heritage, they're telling us it is the Minister of Official Languages who would be in a better position, so she declined. Okay, so Canadian Heritage no longer manages Part 7. Well, I cannot say anything more than what was in the answer we got. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Comments, Mr. Beaulieu, before we go to Mr. Serre? Go ahead. Well, there were other motions they were given notice of, inviting the Minister of Canadian Heritage. So, you know, are we going to have the same minister appear every 2 weeks? There have been other motions tabled by the committee, inviting the Minister of Canadian Heritage, inviting the Minister of Official Languages. So I think this is the third time that Mr. Godin is moving this motion, but we have witnesses here with us today, so if we can send the letter and then hear from our witnesses, I might suggest that maybe we shouldn't really be spending time on this when we have witnesses, because witnesses took time from their day. We have a gentleman from Alberta who was up at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I move that we adjourn debate on this motion so that we actually get to ask our questions to the witnesses. We have the second panel, people from Ontario, who I am sure have good things to share with us. So it's important that we talk to our witnesses and ask them questions. So I move that we adjourn debate. Okay, so we have to follow procedure. There is no more debate. We will have to vote on the adjournment of debate on this motion. Unless there is unanimous consent. Mr. Chair, can I make a comment? No, we will have to vote on it. Well, as long as... So do we have to vote when there's a request to adjourn debate? Yes. Okay. Mr. Chair, my colleague mentioned that I moved the motion for the third time. This is not a point of order. Okay, we are going to vote on the adjournment of debate. That's just my role to remind this to you. There will be no more debate. But if there is then a point of order, I will, of course, hear those. When it comes to the adjournment of the debate, we will have to vote, and then we will have to go to our witnesses depending on the outcome. Okay, we're voting on the adjournment of debate.
Monsieur Iacono.
Pour.
Monsieur Baines.
Oui.
Monsieur Sanson.
D'accord.
Monsieur Serré.
En faveur.
Monsieur Dalton.
Pour. Contre. Ah, contre. Je vous l'ai dit contre.
Monsieur Généreux.
Contre.
Monsieur Godin.
Contre.
Madame Goodridge.
Contre.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Contre.
Madame Ashton.
Moi, je pense que il doit y avoir une vote.
I believe that we need to vote on the motion, so I'm against.
6 contre.
6 against, 5 in favor. So we are back to the motion and the amendment on the motion. Okay, we're back to the amendment. If you're following the proper order. Are there any other comments on the amendment to the motion? I'm looking at the screen. I don't see anything. Ms. Ashton, Mr. Baines, here in the room. Mr. Godin, go ahead. Mr. Chair, if no one wants to take the floor, I will ask the chair to proceed to the vote. Yeah, I was just making sure because I don't always have the people online on the screen, so I was looking at the thumbs up. So we are now voting on the amendment by Mr. Serre. And just to recap, he's suggesting sending a letter from the chair. So our clerk will take us through the voting procedure. So we are voting on Mr. Serre's amendment.
En faveur.
Monsieur Iacono,
En faveur.
Monsieur Baines,
Oui.
Monsieur Sanson,
J'appuie.
Monsieur Serré,
Oui.
Monsieur Dalton,
Contre.
Monsieur Généreux,
Contre.
Monsieur Godin,
Contre.
Madame Goodridge,
Contre.
Monsieur Beaulieu,
Contre.
Madame Ashton,
Contre.
6 contre, 5
Six against, 5 in favor. So the amendment is defeated. We are now voting on the main motion. So back to our clerk. Apologies, Mr. Chair. Can I ask that the motion be read a second time? So the French version, that the committee reports to the House its disappointment with regard to the refusal of the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Ms. Pascale Saint-Onge, to appear in relation to her mandate, in relation to Official Languages Act, as well as in relation to her responsibilities on the Act modifying the Official Languages Act and regulating the use of French in Federally Regulated Private Businesses Act and making consequential amendments. Can I request that we suspend, Mr. Chair?
au règlement.
Point of order. I think that the government telling us that they do not want to lose time and they're now causing us to lose time. That's what's happening. So we have another Franco-Albertan who's with us, Mr. Dupuis, and we have to give her the time he deserves. Thank you, Ms. Goodridge. Mr. Godin. Well, we're hearing two things from government representatives. We want to gain time, but we're losing time. We're asking for the motion to be read again. We're asking for a suspension. Mr. Chair, it is not acceptable and not respectful vis-a-vis our witnesses. People got up very early this morning with the time difference to be here, so thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, well, if we're losing time, it's because of the Conservatives. We just wanted a second reading of the motion. We have our witnesses. There are other motions that are in front of us, inviting ministers. If you want to vote on it, let's vote on it. But Mr. Godin has taken the floor for the 5th or 6th time now, saying the same thing. We have witnesses. He doesn't have a point of order. So we have witnesses and we have important work. So they're playing political games once again. We have witnesses from Alberta, from New Brunswick, from Sudbury who will be with us. So I think we can start hearing from our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Serre. You have a point of order, Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, I find this unacceptable, and I demand that my colleague apologize because they accuse us of repeating the same thing, which is exactly what he has just done. So, Mr. Chair, I request that my colleague apologize. Mr. Godin, I don't think that he was out of bounds when it comes to the rules of procedure and the language that is used by either of the parties on both sides. And we have people tuning in across the country. So There are political considerations on both sides. Now, if we are asked to vote on it, I think we should vote on it. So are we going to proceed? I'm seeing a thumbs up from Mr. Godin. Mr. Chair, I do agree with you. Yeah, we've been wanting to vote on this for a while now. Okay, back to our clerk to vote. We are voting on Mr. Godin's motion as is.
Contre.
Monsieur Iacono. Monsieur Baines.
Against.
Monsieur Sanson.
Keep saying the same one. Huh?
Oh,
Monsieur Serré.
non, non, contre. C'est juste mon bouton. Là.
Monsieur Dalton.
Pour.
Monsieur Généreux.
Pour.
Monsieur Godin.
Pour.
Madame Goodridge.
En faveur.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Oui.
Madame Ashton.
Pour.
Pour 6, contre 5.
Donc, motion adoptée.
Okay, so the motion is adopted. So we are now going back to our witnesses, Mr. Godin. You had used 15 seconds of your time, so go ahead. Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you to our witnesses. I'd like to start with Mr. Dupuy from Alberta. You're telling us that you have a family business and you have managed to carry on this success or this successful enterprise, and you're telling us that you've taken this over from your family and that your daughter will take the company over. So my question is, what would be some additional tools which you do not have access to at this point in time that would make it easier for you to run your business, run your Francophone business in Alberta, so that it's even more attractive for Francophones to come and do their business with your company and come work for you as well? Thank you, Mr. Godin. So one tool I find to be important throughout the procedure to request financing that we had to follow is the following. There were a lot of red tape, a lot of very complicated procedures and hoops to jump through, which isn't really helpful for Francophones in a minority context. So it might be additional help to better understand the government procedures, because it's not everyone who has this talent to understand everything. I think that is the biggest missing piece. Okay, if I get this right, Mr. Dupuy, you'd like to see a reduction in red tape because you're losing a lot of time and you can't really make heads of or tails of the documentation or the forms, so you'd like a bit more active assistance in terms of dealing with that. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Dupuy. Mr. Thomas, you mentioned that Francophone immigration is always more difficult in rural regions. So I think, Mr. Thomas, you captured the problem really well. You are working with the Economic Council. So if you were in our shoes, what would you do so that rural areas in New Brunswick but across the country become more attractive for Francophone immigration and, of course, also to help with economic development even outside of your rural markets places? Thank you for the question, Mr. Godin. This is a very important question indeed, because in rural areas there are multiple factors that make it so that these are less attractive for in terms of international immigration. So, for instance, developing countries, when we are to talk about the Francophonie, it is more attractive for people coming from the bigger cities in Africa with a certain level of education they are more attracted towards cities such as Montreal, Vancouver, Moncton. So it's not easy to pick Tracadie, just as an example. And I agree with Mr. Dupuis when you have very complicated federal rules for small enterprises, again, dealing with a lot of red tape, that makes it harder. For international students, for instance, bigger cities have a lot more success compared to smaller municipalities, because in certain countries in Africa, they go through 6 or 7 proposals or letters before they end up choosing smaller cities. So that makes it a bit more complicated. And then we're talking about more centralized approaches. But what might be useful is providing better access and the same nomination procedures. Sometimes we talk about second languages. In New Brunswick, the situation is such that the language spoken at home, as the French spoken at home, has been on the decline, because immigration, while we need more Francophone immigration to maintain this level, so we take candidates, and most of the time there are more Anglophones than Francophones. So New Brunswick should be in charge of its own destiny with the ratios that are necessary to maintain the 1/3 to 2/3 balance.
Moi, je pense que mon temps est...
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. 20 seconds? Okay. There's immigration, and can you retain younger immigrants so that they can build their futures in rural areas? Yes, but you have to decentralize the services. We can attract anyone anywhere with the technology of today, but if you don't have broadband at good speeds everywhere in the rural regions, I'm positive that the Francophones would stay put and choose anywhere they want to be. But, sometimes you have to have somebody on site, not from Dalhousie or elsewhere. Mr. Sanson, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to our witnesses, particularly Monsieur Dupuis, given the sun has probably not risen in his part of the world right now. I'd like to begin with Mr. Dupuis quite briefly. Have you received any support or assistance from the provincial or federal government? You mentioned that the bureaucratic paperwork and red tape is quite complex and difficult. And how was it for you in your business, either initially or as you go on while trying to grow the business? Thank you, Mr. Sanson. I received a lot of help. We applied for a number of programs, and it's through the Albertan Economic Development Council. We received quite a bit of assistance. Some assistance with their program, training program, and they were telling us what was available and how to go about Travel Alberta, for example. We also have some funding from the municipality and Prairie Scan. There's smaller grants, if you will. They're very modest. Well, thank you. It's good to know that the Economic Development Council of Alberta is involved, because that is their role. It's to assist rural areas particularly. Do you live in a bilingual community right now? I think there's 1 million strong in your area. Not that big. No. We have about 450,000, 20 French-speaking families. Thank you. Thanks for your appearance, Mr. Thomas. the recognition of Mr. Robichaud, which was a key player for the development of bilingualism in New Brunswick. And I'm glad that you mentioned bilingual provinces. Can you give us a sort of overview of the programs or the assistance that you've received, and what's the relationship between yourself and ECOA? Well, it's always been excellent, actually. They've always supported the Economic Council initiatives, as was in. We're going to see some more of this in the Acadian Peninsula shortly. Where the complications set in, it's for SMEs, small enterprises. Mr. Dupuis was very clear, a Francophone entrepreneur in a language minority situation. It's sometimes even the forms you got to fill and everything are much more complicated in French. And if there's a program like Digital Boost, I was going through the requests, and 15% of the requests were from Francophone businesses, SMEs for the most part, don't have much of a chance because they don't have the staff or the HR resources to fill in the forms and to do it completely. That's the same problem that Mr. Dupuis was mentioning. We need help in filling out all the red tape. So ECOA has a role to play to guide, to orient, and to help the SMEs as well, particularly Francophone in this case. So thank you for that clarification. In the region, in the rural regions, as you said, it's difficult to maintain and find manpower, labor. Do you have the opportunity in rural areas to get people part-time, perhaps, for your economic development in your province? Well, either the two witnesses, Mr. Thomas and then Mr. Dupuis. The answer is yes, yes, and we make a lot of efforts to attract labor. A lot of retirees have come back to our associations, like the Economic Council, for example. We see more and more of it happening. Well, thank you for personalizing the situation. Very often, I say governments could develop better strategies to encourage our elders to come back to work, even if it's part-time. On the subject of our senior citizens, if you will, are you doing any special efforts to try to attract them? You said it's very, very difficult to attract people into rural areas. Have you made any attempts? 10 seconds. Well, we're currently doing that. We have one employee, our driver, who is a delivery guy, and he came to work with us because he only wants to work a few days or hours per week, and it's a big help to us. Thank you, Mr. Dupuis. Our next second Vice President, Monsieur Beaulieu. 6 minutes. Thank you. My first question is for Mr. Dupuis. First of all, I recognize and I congratulate you for your resistance and resilience and perseverance. In your area, you're telling us that there's about 97% that are Anglophone speakers only. In your business, do people speak English or French, basically? Within the business, on the 5 employees, is one person only that is unilingual English. The others are all Francophone. French is the language of work in the business. Good. And of course, with your clientele, perhaps English is the language. Well, we offer services in French. We have a lot of tourism that come from Quebec, and they go through going to the Rockies And they make a point of stopping at Vermillon because we do have Francophone services. Good. Francophone immigrants which settle in Vermilion and Vermillon, do they adopt to the French language or the English language? More so to the English, of course. Over the 25 years in my military career, before I started my business, I've lived in all provinces in Canada, most of them anyway, and they're mostly Anglophone, so it's been a challenge, an ongoing challenge to get our kids to continue to speak French within the community at least. Thank you. Second question from Mr. Thomas. Earlier you mentioned that the proportion of Francophones with the mother tongue spoken at French is in decline. Perhaps we could send our Francophone immigrants into areas where there's a concentration of Francophone speakers. What do you think? Well, not only where the majority might be speaking French in certain communities, but you get a city like Moncton, which is bilingual. If you add more Anglophones, we won't find ourselves in a situation such as Vermillon, but bit by bit, when there's an Anglophone majority, even in bilingual cities where it's 50-50 roughly, you still see an increase in the Anglophone population. In Restigouche, for example, in Acadia, it's becoming more and more difficult to provide and to maintain services in French. And it's a very vibrant Francophone community. The percentages, we should always try to aim. We got to catch up with the past, in fact. We have to aim for a higher target in Francophone representation in order to maintain a dynamic Francophone economy. Well, if you have Francophone immigrants in Moncton, it's not exactly an advantage for the Acadian area. Well, when it's a second language, even Francophone immigrants, they'll go to Moncton and they realize that they have better employment opportunities if they are bilingual or speak English. So they adapt to the English community rather than the French. Would you agree with the principle that we should try to regionalize Francophone immigration into areas where there's a higher percentage of Francophone? Yes, and I would include Moncton in that. Moncton is a central point for bilingual services in the region, in the province. We have call centers that are functioning in both languages. Translation is readily available. And we don't want to, neglect Moncton, but I mean, everything in the greater area is Francophone. I find that quite interesting because that reality, that economic reality, well, that's the way it works. I mean, you want a job, you have to accept that you're going to be learning English or working in English. Now, Bill 101 was based on the concept, obviously. But there's supposed to be measures in place. I think we had set a target of 2 years that those under federal jurisdiction should offer French services in areas where there's a strong concentration of Francophones. Were you consulted on any of these issues? Not our Economic Council, no, but for federal Francophone services in New Brunswick, we have good service. In the Moncton area, even in Fredericton, which is the capital, of course, I've had no negative feedback coming from any of our members on that. But, the more help we get, the better it'll be. Well, thank you, and we'll conclude with the north of Manitoba. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to our witnesses. Speaking of economic development and what you might need to improve opportunities, we have to examine what are the obstacles. Often, as we know from this committee, it's a matter of access to services. Early childhood education, for example, we've heard witnesses tell us explaining that in rural areas in particular, Francophone minority communities are often more welcoming, and it would be even more welcoming if we could provide early childhood education in French. Of course, we realize that there's a shortage of labor in these Francophone communities. So perhaps yourself and then Mr. Thomas, what impact is this labor shortage due to a lack of early childhood education and child care services in French? And how is this regarded by Francophones in your community? Well, that's a very interesting issue. Child care services in areas of a high concentration of Francophones, we don't have too many problems, but it's like every other domain. We have difficulty in finding staff. More and more Francophone parents have to send their kids to English-speaking childcare, and that's very unfortunate because, as I was responding to your colleague, we don't want to ignore Francophone immigration. We don't want to limit their access to large municipalities, but kids make friends early, and their friends are mostly English rather than French. It's essential for young children to have the proper language. Yes, well, we know that it's quite a concern. The situation is similar in Manitoba. We're talking about economic development here, and you have to return. You got to make sure you have enough people to follow through, to build for the future. What can you do to retain Francophone families in the areas of origin? Yes, well, the lack of employment, perhaps, or we have to go and get the students and entice them, and it's a problem that exists in New Brunswick like everywhere else in the country, even though we are a bilingual province. Okay, I'd like to add Mr. Thomas, the same question as to Mr. Dupuis. Early childhood education, child care in French. I know in Alberta you have an education, very dynamic education programs in French, but I'd like to know, you said it was quite difficult to maintain your French when you're in an English context. I live in the north of Manitoba, a largely Francophone area, but even at that, school is a social institution. It's a community establishment. Do you think that we should have more services? Early childhood education, I repeat, or support for the concept in order to retain and to welcome French-speaking individuals and continue developing the economy of the region in French. Well, for early childhood, well, my youngster is 26 years old, so I'm really not too familiar with the lower age groups. In Vermilion, we do not have bilingual early childhood education or services. A lot of communities like Wainwright, with St. Paul, with Bonneville, offer services in French to children. What was very concerning when I moved to Alberta, my kids went to Francophone schools up until grade 6 or 7. After that, not enough French speakers to offer the curricula or the services appropriate to them to develop. No matter what advanced mathematics or chemistry was always taught in English. So they end up going to English language schools, and this is very, very common in many of the communities around here. At mid-school, grade 7 or so, they migrate to Anglophone schools. More schools offer Francophone immersion courses, but there are very, very few that are strictly monolingual Francophone schools past grade 6. So options have been developed to offer courses for teens or adolescents, distance learning, but that's not the same. You're lacking the group cohesion, the solidarity, and other activities. Thank you, Mr. Dupuis. Thank you, Madam Ashton. Mr. Thomas, rather, thank you. I know you well. I think you're quite aware of the situations in New Brunswick. The committee considers you one of the stars, one of the representatives of the French language in Vermilion and in that part of Alberta. And it's very impressive what you do. So 3 witnesses are waiting in the wings for the next session. It's part of democracy. It must be very frustrating for the witnesses to see that, we had to sacrifice some time to deal with the procedures and protocols of committee work. But it's unfortunate for the witnesses to put them on standby like that, but it's part of democracy, and we're lucky to be having the privilege of exercising that democracy. It could be a heck of a lot rougher. It's part of the ups and downs of Parliament, and we thank you for your presentations. We're going to suspend for the next group, but if there is any supplementary information that you would like to submit to us, please send it to our clerk, and she will share it with all the other members of the committee. And if you think you have useful information that we should have heard, please provide it in writing. Because it's very important for us in completing our review. Whether it's in writing or verbal, that's great. So we're going to suspend to prepare for the next group.
We are resuming. I'd like to welcome our witnesses in the second panel. We have Mr. Marc Gauthier, who's the board chair of the Association Canadienne-Française de l'Ontario du Grand Sudbury. Thank you for being with us. We also have Mr. Francois Affan, who's the executive director of the Economic Development Council of the Northwest Territories. It is quite early where you are. And then we also have Madeleine Arbe, who's the executive director of the Economic Development Council for Manitoba Bilingual Municipalities. Welcome. So how we function in this committee is as follows. I will give each of you the floor for about 5 minutes. If you want to keep it shorter, then that's good. We'll ask more questions. But this is just so you can introduce yourself, and then we will go into a round of interactive questions from the different political parties who are represented by the members here. So we are going to start with Mr. Gauthier. Go ahead. You have a maximum of 5 minutes, and the floor is yours. I'd like to thank you for inviting us to take part in your study. The ACFO Greater Sudbury's mandate, which I represent, is to engage and mobilize the community, ensure the rights of Francophones, and advance the priorities of the Francophone community. We serve Francophones living in the communities of Sudbury East, Espanola, and the city of Greater Sudbury. Northern Ontario's economy has always been precarious. It's been subject to fluctuations in the raw materials market, and in many of our region's communities, the services sector has become the economic engine. For several years now, we've seen an exodus of young people to the country's major urban centers, and our population is aging. The French-speaking, the Francophone community is not immune to economic impacts and is arguably more vulnerable given its demographic weight. In order to control its destiny, a community must exercise power over various economic levers. A community must have governance of its institutions, must sit on and exert influence within organizations common to both linguistic groups, and must have access to the same resources as the majority. In Ontario, Francophones have full management of elementary and secondary schools. We manage 2 community colleges. But unfortunately, we still do not have the management of university education in our region. For decades, our organization has been calling for the creation of a French language university that is for, by, and with Sudbury's Francophone population. According to an economic impact study conducted for l'Assemblée de la Francophonie de l'Ontario and University of Sudbury, a Francophone university represents a potential annual economic impact of close to $90 million and would generate more than $8 per every dollar invested by the various levels of government. This represents direct and indirect employment for local residents, and it would enable the community to train its youth according to its needs and keep them in the north. And it would also allow us to be a strong and important player in the local economy. Last year, ACFO commissioned a study on the state of bilingualism at City Hall in Greater Sudbury. The municipal government is very close to its citizens, and therefore this was very important in the lives of the Francophone population. Following the report, our organization noted a significant loss of French at City Hall. And we're not talking about the front line, but the disappearance of the French from the decision-making bodies. We must therefore work hand in hand to promote the importance of Francophones in a city where the population is just over 22% Francophone. Francophone immigration to Northern Ontario is one of the economic levers needed for its survival, and Sudbury has been designated as a welcoming Francophone community for immigration. The ASFO works in partnership with other agencies to welcome and integrate newcomers to our region, and one of our responsibilities is to put together kits for newcomers, services in a variety of areas, including education, finance, employability, and housing. In order to maintain the demographic weight of Francophones in minority communities, the federal government must absolutely increase Francophone immigration targets and respect these, and year after year. If you want to increase the active offer of French language services, we need to increase the population's demand for French language services, and this demand must be made to different agencies and the private sector. For several years now, ASFO has maintained a directory on its website of institutions and businesses that offer services in French to their customers. This list is updated annually, and we also have decided to work more actively on this file this year, tackling, among other things, the language and security of community members and encouraging people to lodge complaints when their rights are not respected. Since the beginning of my speech, I've told you about some of the initiatives that ACFO is undertaking for the Francophone community, but it's also important to note that we're doing this thanks to the hard work of our employees, including our General Manager, Joan Gervais. And we also rely on the work of a handful of volunteers who give their time, but that is unfortunately not enough. ASFO is a nonprofit that is underfunded, and we are also grateful for the recent increase in operating funding from Canadian Heritage, but it's far from being sufficient. We currently operate with an allocation of $72,000 from the federal government, which represents only 32% of our operating budget. We have to spend a lot of time filling the rest of our budget through other means, which takes us away from our primary objectives and exhausts staff and volunteers. With adequate funding, we could have the necessary staff to expand the space, the Francophone services within our communities, to ensure that our rights are respected by the different agencies, and to contribute to the development of our community. And this is really urgent. Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. You can expand later on when you will ask you some questions. So, Mr. Afan from the Economic Development Council of Northwest Territories, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Yellowknife. It is the ancestral territories of the Yellowknife Dene. My name is Francois Afan. I am the General Director of the Economic Development Council of Northwest Territories, so CDETNO. Our organization was created in 2003 with a vision to be a sort of a hub when it comes to economic development in the Northwest Territories. Our mission is to promote, stimulate, accompany, and help in a general sense economic development, sustainable economic development in our communities. We serve all communities, by the way, Francophone and Anglophone. So as a member of the RDEE Canada, and in partnership with organizations from other provinces and territories, our organization works on the following strategic areas: entrepreneurship, employability, and economic development in our communities. And with my team, we prepared some numbers that give you a good understanding of what we have done. So here are some numbers. From 2015 to 2023, we have had more than 40,000 visits to our employment center and more than 3,000 meetings with entrepreneurs. And we've had multiple information sessions which were organized in Northwest Territories, and we've had 726 researchers that were made available, and we've provided equipment, and we've also had 692 job listings that were made available or published on our website. And we've organized 14 job fairs, and more than 6,000 job seekers in Northwest Territories received training through us. And we've had more than 4,000 participants who took part in local events, and hundreds of young people who made their debuts in the local workplace. So those are just some numbers that give you a summary of our activities over the past number of years. And this document, I also sent it to the clerk of your committee. And we also have some testimonials and videos that we've collected and produced over the years. So just to wrap up, our organization is sort of the hub when it comes to economic development in the Northwest Territories, both for Francophone and Anglophone communities. So there's nothing that takes place in terms of economic development in our territory where we are not at the table or where we're not a partner. We are also working closely with Francophones, Anglophones, Allophones, First Nations, anyone and everyone who's looking for a job or companies who are looking for labor, they come knocking on our door. And with that, I would like to thank you. Thank you, Mr. Afan. Now we are going to go to the Economic Development and Bilingual Municipalities Council of Manitoba. You have the floor, Ms. Arbe, for 5 minutes. I think you're on mute. Thank you, and I apologize for that. Mr. Chair, distinguished vice chairs of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament and committee members, and partners in economic development of official language minority communities. My name is Madeleine Arbe. I'm a proud Franco-Manitoban from the land of Luriel. I am honored to speak to you today as Executive Director of the Conseil de Développement Économique des Municipalités Bilingues de Manitoba. We use the acronym CDEM, and we're a member of the Réseau de Développement Économique et d'Employabilité Canada. I'm also speaking to you from the city of Winnipeg, located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. On behalf of the CDEM, actually created by the Association des Municipalités Bilingues de Manitoba in 1996, CDEM is the economic development engine for its 15 member municipalities. In Manitoba, bilingual municipal leadership is at the head of Group AMBM, which is a consortium of 3 organizations with complementary vocations, AMBM, CDEM, and EcoWest Canada, our most recent subsidiary specializing in green economy since 2008. Together, these 3 organizations actively contribute to the development, growth, and sustainability of Manitoba's Francophone communities. For Manitoba's Francophonie, economic development is directly linked to municipal authority, and this unique structure generates multiple leverage effects and creates the right conditions for setting up the infrastructure and pillars needed to deploy programs, activities, and events which normalize life in French and support the development and sustainability of the Francophonie. By focusing on the creation of a sustainable framework, we are taking charge of our development issues and putting the odds in our favor to meet the vitality indicators for official language minority communities. On a personal note, I'm proud to share with you that as a senator, my mother, Maria Chaput, played a major role in ensuring that the importance of vitality indicators for official language minority communities was recognized at every opportunity. These indicators include the presence of institutions and an active offer of services, economic and social integration, influence and power within public institutions, including the presence of municipal infrastructures. And that is exactly what the fact that our economic development structure is connected to bilingual municipalities, the level of government closest to the citizens, brings us. So we have been able to offer a wide variety of services to companies for community development, employability, economic immigration, youth, and other areas, including tourism, by the way. So it is thanks to the leadership of these 3 organizations that we have created the capacity for municipalities to create the Community Center of Taché. The municipality considers this as an excellent opportunity for further strengthening the Francophone community. Since 2021, the 3 sister organizations have been implementing a strategy. This is a very ambitious and visionary strategy. And we are talking about $259 million worth of projects in digital industries and tourism. We have also set aside $11.6 million for economic projects, more than $60 million for the creation of a fund for infrastructure for Francophone students, and We've carried out consultation rounds dating back to 2020. As I speak to you, we are doing a new round of consultations to update our member municipalities. So the deployment of the current strategy has had a great impact in terms of the vitality of our communities. Thank you, Madam Arbe. You will be able to continue and expand further as we ask you some questions. So we're now going to do a first round of 5 minutes for each of the political parties.
5 minutes, so we get time for a second turn. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I note that most of you are part of the RDEE, the Network for Employment and Employability for Francophones. Recently, we've met with a number of individuals and organizations who proved themselves to be quite representative and very dynamic in the development of Francophone economies. They made presentations which were very frank. One of the items that allowed me to ask questions of the administrators within Francophone world in Canada, there are a lot of Francophone organizations who offer a multiplicity of services. Now, do you think it might be possible that there be fewer number of these organizations in order to concentrate the funding to organizations who are targeting economic development for Francophone communities? Madame Ardez in particular and Mr. Afan could give us some words on that. Well, thank you. I'll begin by saying your question is most important and very significant. National support for the Gaulois phenomenon is often the target of complaints, but the impact would be large if we were better resourced. I'm talking about the NWT. We're isolated, we're far off from the center, and we have some very specialized needs. We have Northern College, formal education. We have school boards, Francophone school boards, the Association of the Franco communities. Employment and employability is our particular objective. And our work is being recognized even by the Anglophone communities. This is the advantage that we have. Well, human nature has it that we often criticize that the Francophone communities are always complaining, and it's human nature. But how would you qualify your cooperation and collaboration with other organizations? We've often heard, I've been on the Official Languages Committee for a number of time, that accountability, organizations are underfunded or have difficulty working together. We hear that quite often. And I've met and have discussed, and I've congratulated RD leaders on what they're doing. If we're going to be frank, the financial conditions of the country as a whole right now, whatever we do now is how it's going to be in future. So often there's a very rigorous examination of the management, the financial management of Francophone organizations as well as others. The relationships that you have with other organizations, could you find economies of scale by working closer together perhaps? And Madame Arthez can try and answer to that question as well. The Manitoba situation is a little bit different. the Francophone communities. Manitoba has a lot of Francophone communities, but they're dispersed over the territory. It's the birthplace of a lot of our cultural, linguistic origins. We have a lot of organizations which have a role in this, of course. I mentioned quite a few. And they are wanting to live their lives in French. Yes, there's a bit of competition among these organizations, but we have to become a little bit more unified if we want to attain our mutual and similar objectives. It's up to us to work together to compare mandates, budgets, so that we're all on the same track. Thank you very much. 5 minutes, pretty quick. We're going away from Kamouraska. We're going to the east of Ontario. Mr. Drouin. Well, the sun rises in Ontario, well, after the Atlantic, of course. No, but I said in Ontario. Thank you to all the witnesses. Ms. Arbez, I listened quite attentively to what you've said, and I quite liked you come from the land of Louis Riel, the heartland of the Métis, and I'm going to use that expression next time I meet Franco-Manitobans. There's been a few changes, of course, in your provincial government, and I have a question as to your relationship with the current Manitoba government. Has it been sort of a reawakening of relationships? Is it more open? Well, in fact, our premier participated before his elections, of course. He wanted to discuss his positions in French in recognition of the Francophone. He met with the chair of AMBM and dealt with municipal officials as well. And he always spoke in French if it was a French community. So a full recognizance that we can work together. There's also a Manitoba law, statute on languages in French. Do you think there's room for improvement in that, either the legislation or processes that stem from that? Improve services in French, and how would this relate to the economic interest that you represent? Well, the Manitoba law targeted certain services initially, of course, and it also is where numbers count, where there's a concentration of Francophone. So the challenge, évidemment, obviously, were providing services where they were less numerous. So we have to overcome these challenges. We often meet with the minister who is responsible for implementing the Charter of Languages. There is a true recognition of the value of French in Manitoba. And of course, we deal more directly with the municipalities, and they have created organizations or analog organizations for French language services. They do consult us, and we're pleased that they do. How we can get to municipal bylaws, for example, integrate that into for French language services as well. Well, Bill 8 in Ontario, I'm from a politicized family, and 80% Francophone in my community, but before Bill 8, it's not all municipalities that accepted Bill 8. And I would tell the various mayors, if the minority was English, should I offer them only 20% services? Do I speak to them only in French? And finally, the message got through. He convinced himself and then other mayors. What's the threshold? How many Francophones are among these municipalities? Are they all in a minority situation? Yeah, even in Winnipeg, they're a minority community. And it's a first, actually. I'll give you an example. one municipality invited us. They were all Anglophones. But we recognize that we have allies among the Anglophones, obviously, and they are offering us some opportunities. Mr. Gauthier, as a Franco-Ontarian, I have a colleague here who's going to ask you some questions. Mr. Afan, in Northwest Territories, you offer services in French. You reach out to Francophones. That must be one challenge because of the expansive territory that the Northwest Territories covers. Can you give us some numbers on numbers, Anglophone, Francophone, etc.? Well, we try to do our best with the resources we have. It's a huge territory. We cooperate with organizations or representatives where they can be found. We go and see them, but it's a constant challenge because obviously Yellowknife has 40% of the population. But we do spread out to other communities. Thank you. Let's go to Pointe de l'Île in Montreal. Mr. Beaulieu, 5 minutes. We're going urban. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question for Mr. Afan. In the document that we received, the objective of your organization is to nurture the economic development of Francophone, and you offer services in the languages appropriate to each community. Could you explain that a little bit? Is it for the Francophonie or... Well, thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. If you want services to exist in French, you have to address it through a Francophone organization because they will protect and promote the French language. And as it needs, they will do their best to create the proper relationships with the Anglophone portion. We only have a small corner of the table. As a Francophone organization, with the skills and capacities that we have to concentrate on the business, on enterprise. For development, startups in particular. Other members of the community and Anglophones, for example, are approaching us and saying, hey, we'd like to have similar services. So they do recognize our organizations and that we do defend the French rights, but we also recognize the needs of Anglophone employers. So here's the manpower, the labor force that we suggest that you hire. So try to hire more Francophones. And very often that's how we add Francophones to our communities. Are there businesses in your territory where the French is a language of work in the businesses and enterprises? I know of a few. But when we have a clientele that's a third party, it'll be in English. But yes, we do have employers that work in French. But those who are exclusively Francophone, well, I don't think they'd, I think they'd go broke pretty fast because it's only 10% of the population. Okay. Yes, that's probably, yeah, English is probably the first language spoken. But for Mr. Gauthier, you said in Greater Sudbury, 22% Francophone population. So French is in a minority situation, of course. You also said that you don't have a university, a Francophone university. What would be the importance and significance of a French university for and by us, for us, etc.? Would that attract more Francophones to Sudbury? Well, right now we have a university which is bilingual, and the needs of the majority, of course, supersede the minority requirements. A lot of the Francophone programs were cut from the university, financial difficulties. It was quite viable, though. We need an economic lever. francophone programs by francophones for francophones. So we're becoming a more significant economic player in our community. It allows us, to maintain the youth. We've lost a lot of young francophones to Ottawa, University of Ottawa, very bilingual. They left our region and migrated to Ottawa. Often when they move away from their home community, they don't return. So this would allow us to attract not only our own, but any new immigrants who are Francophone. I was quite surprised, 22%. Are they concentrated in a particular 37% of the population are bilingual, apparently, Greater Sudbury. And there are other Sudbury is an amalgamated municipality, and it was aggregated. There's Point-le-Velay, Chetford, where the concentration is much higher. Thank you, Mr. Gauthier, Mr. Beaulieu. We're leaving Montreal to go to the north of Manitoba. Ms. Ashton, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Okay, thank you, and thank you to our witnesses from Manitoba and from other areas. Good day, Madame Abez. I might address the first few questions to you. We are all aware of the very important work that the ACBM works in Manitoba, and for our purposes, our study, we're looking for key factors that would help us drive a more sustainable economy. We need to talk about the challenges, the reality in rural communities or isolated communities must be supported as well, and they have needs. We've learned at this committee that the best way to retain youth and young families, to allow them to work in their language, they'll stay for the long term. The labor shortages, of course, in areas such as early childhood education, child care, are very, very important. They're essential if a family is going to settle itself in a community and can stay there to contribute to community economic development. Can you share with us your perspective on this labor shortage in education is an obstacle to economic development, and what type of solutions might we find or explore with federal help? Yes, this labor shortage in education is a factor. There's a number of factors that are identifiable as obstacles or challenges in retaining our population and in welcoming new residents. We're currently working on a survey, an administrative survey, to find the exact areas and shortages of labor: health, education, and other basic services, of course, where the parents will sell off their business or the children are not interested in inheriting it. But we don't want to lose these people, because these are essential services for these communities. Our economic immigration strategies and our work in the field has led us to identify what is necessary in each municipality in order to fill the need. We're working hand in glove with these immigration authorities on a daily basis in Manitoba. This would be one of the pieces of the puzzle to resolve the situation. But the situation is quite urgent to fill these shortages. Well, thank you very much. I'll switch themes for a moment. the challenges. We know that in Manitoba, international students, Francophone, contribute to our establishments, institutions, our communities, in the immediate space and in the long term as well. The Minister of Immigration is going to put a cap, a limit on the number of international students that we can receive in Canada. We have no exemption for Francophone international students. Their reality is quite different in terms of that category. Are the communities in Manitoba concerned about the recent announcement of a cap on international students? Because, the acceptance of Francophone international students is an important plank in a program to ensure community economic development. Quite true, quite true. We're doing our best to identify that, and one of the best sources of labor, Francophone labor, are these international students. We want to recruit more of them if we could. Thank you, Madame Arbé.
Un peu modifié, mais on commence avec M. Dalton pour 5 minutes. Allez-y, M. Dalton.
We'll do a second round, starting with Mr. Dalton. Thank you. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Gauthier. So French Canadians, historically speaking, went to Sudbury to work in the mines, in the farms, etc. Are these sectors still of importance for French Canadians in that region? The mining sector is still an important economic driver for the region, but the economy has diversified quite a bit. We now have tertiary services, hospitality services, colleges, education. They have taken up a lot of space, and trade as well, because Sudbury acted as sort of the capital of the north of Ontario. So it has grown into a commercial trading center as well. And there's also entrepreneurship. I went through Sudbury once, and you were telling us 22% is Francophone and 38% is bilingual. Are we talking about a stable population? Has it gone up or gone down? Because aging is an issue, and it's happening everywhere. But especially with the Francophone population, is it more of an issue? Well, that has an impact, but our demographic weight is also going down. We're not necessarily having a fewer number of Francophones, but our demographic weight in the overall population is going down. It's more Anglophones who are coming here to settle. So we have more Anglophone immigration than Francophone immigration. So we need a higher level of Francophone immigration in our community. I started by making reference to different sectors, for instance, the forestry industry or mining industry. But we are seeing with the current government that they are not really encouraging the development of natural resources. And we're talking about a lot of important work, important jobs. So people are asking themselves the question to stay or not, because they're not maybe seeing the employment opportunities in these domains. Okay, Mr. Raffan, what do you think the federal government can do to raise awareness around providing business and communication services in both languages? Thank you for the question. Well, the government can assist us when we work with members of our communities, all entrepreneurs, when we're trying to convince them to hire bilingual employees. Because when you are the only Francophone organization in your community, that unlocks the door of a world of opportunity for you too, because there's a Francophone community and there are potential customers in that community. So if the Francophone population is encouraged to work and operate in their own language, that brings a certain level of pride, so that it is the pathway to acquiring new customers as well. What is the size of the Francophone population in the Northwest Territories, and how has it changed over the years, and what are the economic characteristics of this group? Thank you for the question. We are talking about 45,000 people, 20,000 in Yellowknife, the capital, so 40 to 50% of the general population. Now, in Yellowknife, we have 20,000 French speakers. About 2,000 identify themselves as Francophones, and another 2,000 to 3,000 identify themselves as Francophiles. So we have 3,500 to 5,000 in Yellowknife that speak French. Okay, perfect. Madame Arbez, what challenges have you come across over the past decade, and have these challenges and obstacles been the same, or have they changed? Perfect question, Mr. Dalton, but you have used up all of your time. So next questions will be from Franco-Ontarian from the north. Mr. Marc Sere, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all three of our witnesses for the work you're doing in Manitoba, for instance. It's very, very important. Mr. Afan, I had the opportunity of visiting Yellowknife, so thank you for your comments to contribute to the action plan, to which we added $1.1 billion last year, and we've been keeping that going since 2015. So thank you very much for the work you've been doing. My first question will go to Mr. Gauthier. Thank you so much for the work in the field of education. You worked as a director in that field for many years, and you were on the board of ACFO. You work with the council, and you work with Joanne Gervais. And Joanne is, of course, doing impressive work in the region with her team of volunteers. So there are so many elements, but when we talk about education, I actually went on your website to get some information. In the Greater Sudbury, we are talking about a population that's bilingual. 49% of the population, rather, is bilingual. So it's the highest level of bilingualism in that part of Ontario. So the University of Sudbury is very, very important as an economic driver for the region, for Francophones. And you were saying that $1 for every dollar invested by the federal government and the provincial government are contributing or bringing back $8 in terms of contribution to the economy. So can you talk to us a bit more about having a Francophone university? There we had the Boreal College, for instance, because we're talking about economic development specifically. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank you. And of course, it creates employment. It helps retain a certain type of employees in the community, so people from the university circle. It helps with the diversity of the community, and more people in the community end up buying houses, cars, go shop in the shops that are around. So these people also pay municipal taxes. They help the municipality to maintain roads. They help with the garbage collection, etc. So it is an economic force. So Francophones can decide where the needs are, what the needs are, to support the community. We can train young people in entrepreneurship. We can train the not so young also so that they can improve their professional skills. You refer to immigration, and Sudbury is a very welcoming community. Of course, there's recruitment, and retention. So could you talk to us a bit more about the role of the municipality of Sudbury and AGFO? What kind of work have you been doing to retain Francophone immigrants in the region? Of course, there is there are multiple organizations that are involved. Some work directly to retain or welcome immigrants. For instance, the Community Center of Greater Sudbury is one such organism. They welcome immigrants. They accompany them in terms of education, healthcare, and our role is to support these people and introduce to them the whole suite of services that are available in French in Sudbury. So we reach out to them. We provide them documentation in paper because not everyone always has access to internet. Okay, very quickly, so your role as AGFO within the province of Ontario, or how do you manage your relationship with the province? Well, we're trying to work with our MPPs, MPPs from the region, Mr. West, Madame Gignac. So we're directly working with them, and we try also to work with AFO. Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. Thank you, Mr. Serre. Now we are going to Mr. Beaulieu for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that can be asked to all of our witnesses. So to encourage the economic development of Francophone communities and the vitality of Francophone communities, Francophone immigration, should it be targeted towards regions where you have a higher concentration of Francophones? I would say yes, straight away, to that, because in the north, Francophone immigration is our only vein of survival. Without it, we can't keep going. We have no choice but to focus on Francophone immigration, and we have to make it a priority because otherwise the Francophone community will simply disappear. So should we target and concentrate the Francophone immigration to regions where you have a higher concentration of Francophones? Economic Francophone immigration should be targeted to where we have labor shortages, and we should also try to increase the intensity of the Francophone population in these places. So if we channel Francophone economic immigration to places where there is an Anglophone dominance, then that is not the best use of this resource? Well, in a way, yes, because in some places there is a Francophone community and we are just filling in certain specific gaps, or elsewhere we are finding labor and we have to retain these people and attract new members to these communities as well. Mr. Gauthier? Well, my only comment will be that we have to be aware of the fact that if we are sending Francophone immigrants to regions where there are no Francophones, we may end up not being able to retain them. We have to send them to communities, Francophone communities that are welcoming. It helps with their integration in our communities. 30 seconds. Yes, I agree. Madame Arbez, you said that people want to live their lives in French. So is it possible for people to do that, to live their lives in French in their public lives? Well, yes, in certain parts of Manitoba that is possible, and that is the strategy as well, to allow for this to happen in these communities. Mr. Gauthier was referring to English, but when we are recruiting people for Francophone economic immigration, we make it a priority that they have to have a certain level of English as well, in addition to the French. Thank you. Madam Ashton, we're now going to you for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you very much. I have similar questions as the ones I asked to Madame Arbez. I will now ask them to Mr. Afan. So there are a lot of similarities between what we are seeing over here and what we're seeing over in the north. Do you think that the federal government should be part of the solution when it comes to taking care of labor shortage in early childhood services and education services? Especially for economic development. So do you think this labor shortage will have an impact on families staying in your region? Is that an obstacle to retention, but also an obstacle to economic development in the Northwest Territories? Thank you very much for the question. Yes, Madam Ashton, yes, yes, and yes to all of your questions. We suffer from a chronic labor shortage. And if we could, we would have dogs and animals come over here and work. We are in such desperation. And we are losing families. They are choosing to leave because there are no services for early childcare services or early learning opportunities. There's a center at Yellowknife with 37 places, and the waiting list has 50 people on it. But you have Francophone families who are sending their children to English schools as well. So we need more support. Because once a child is in English kindergarten, then that's it. They will continue in that system and will be completely immersed in that English school system. So that is actually critical for the survival of our communities. This is just in Yellowknife. In the smaller communities, there are no Francophone childcare services. So there are communities that are simply eroding away because they're not the majority. So if we have more services, we will be able to convince more Francophone families to stay here. Thank you, Mr. Afan. Thank you, Madam Ashton. We have to adjourn because in 2 minutes we have another committee that will be using this room. So I'd like to thank all of our witnesses, Madam Arbe, Mr. Afan, Mr. Gauthier, for your time and contributions. That has been indeed very, very useful. If you have any additional information that you haven't had the time to share with us, you have the opportunity of providing that information to us in writing to our clerk, who will then share that information with the members of the committee. Thank you once again for taking time and participating in our working. So it's great to see that we have this beautiful big country even within the Francophonie. So I'd like to wish everyone a good week. And before adjourning, Mr. Godin, so what are we doing next Monday? Are we still on this topic? Yes, we have more witnesses, yes. Okay, I was thinking about the Monday after that. With that, the meeting is adjourned.
Merci. Bonjour.